Board of Education, Island Trees Union Free School District, number 26 versus Pico, is the only court case about school book banning to reach the Supreme Court.
I realized that they were removing books not on educational criteria, but on political motivation.
Protect students, young, immature minds from certain stimuli that we feel is potentially dangerous to them.
That local communities have a certain right to a certain amount of control in their community.
They don't have a right to mind control.
The landmark case raised difficult questions about rights and responsibilities. How to balance a parent's right to control what their child reads with a student's right to obtain information. How to weigh a school's responsibility to protect students from age-inappropriate material with the school's responsibility to educate students about history and diversity. In 1982, the Supreme Court gave its answer, deciding in Pico that while books could be removed for pervasive vulgarity and age inappropriateness, they could not be removed for ideas as this infringed on students' First Amendment rights to receive information. While the landmark ruling has been championed by free speech advocates, others have used its loopholes to limit the availability of some books in school libraries. The controversy surrounding Island Trees versus Pico highlights different views about students, parents, and educators' rights and responsibilities, while also demonstrating how, sometimes, students must take responsibility for demanding their rights. Most people would like to believe that book banning does not happen in America. More likely, they think of Nazis burning books by Jewish and leftist writers. But America has its own history of book censorship, such as southern states forbidding the sale of Uncle Tom's Cabin, Comstock anti-obscenity laws prohibiting the publication of Ulysses, and even the Comic Code Authority policing the content of comic books. The protests of the 60s and 70s brought new First Amendment challenges. Mary Beth Tinker, who at 13 wore a black armband to school in protest of the Vietnam War and prompted the landmark case Tinker versus Des Moines, recalls the backlash against the protests of the 60s.
But some adults want to censor young people and disrespect young voices. And so the principals made a rule against us wearing the armbands, and 5 of us were suspended.
In 1974, concern over traditional American values erupted in the Great Textbook War in Kanawha County, West Virginia. Protesters fired shotguns at school buses and tossed dynamite at the school, all because they objected to a new multicultural language arts textbook. The next year, in 1975, a new book banning controversy began in Long Island, New York, after 2 school board members, Richard Ahrens and Frank Martin, received a list of 32 books deemed unsuitable for children while at an education conference sponsored by a conservative parents group. When Ahrens and Martin discovered 9 of these titles in the Island Trees High School library and 2 in the junior high library, they tried to remove them on the grounds that they were anti-American, anti-Christian, anti-Semitic, and just plain filthy.
Mr. Pico loves to equate the motivations of the Board of Education to politics. I won't take the rap for that. If you want to equate a motivation to me, make it morality.
One of the books they removed was Alice Childress's A Hero Ain't Nothing But a Sandwich, for including a passage in which a black school teacher says to his class that George Washington was a slaveholder.
I do not know what is so moral about denying the fact that George Washington owned slaves.
Other books removed included A Reader for Writers for Using the Word Ain't, an African-American short story collection edited by Langston Hughes, and several novels including Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five. Challenging the school board's actions were 5 Island Trees students between the ages 13 and 18 who filed a lawsuit arguing that removing the books violated their First Amendment rights. The lead plaintiff was then high school senior Stephen Pico.
It's the responsibility of schools, of educators, of school board members to teach a variety of ideas and perspectives in our schools.
On March 2nd, 1982, Stephen Pico, now 22, was in college when the case was finally argued before the Supreme Court. The school board's lawyer, George W. Lipp Jr., argued for local control.
This ability to tailor local programs to local needs is healthy. It should not require the intercession of the federal judiciary.
According to Lipp, the books removed were vulgar. Pico's lawyer, Alan H. Levine, replied that
a half dozen vulgar words in the course of a book is not the basis for ban. I don't think that a school board can cloak its political concerns in the mantle of educational suitability.
On June 25, 1982, the majority of the court, albeit in a fraction opinion, sided with Pico. Justice William Brennan, writing the plurality decision, explained, "In brief, we hold that local school boards may not remove books from school library shelves simply because they dislike the ideas contained in those books. Those dissenting, however, argued that there is no right to receive information in the context of schools because the books may be borrowed from a public library, read at a university library, purchased at a bookstore, or loaned by a friend, and that the decision standard of educational suitability is a standardless standard that affords no more than subjective guidance to school boards." Nonetheless,
Pico versus Board of Education resulted in all of the 11 books being returned to the library shelves and used in the schools without restriction.
the Supreme Court decision in Board of Education versus Pico ruled in favor of students' First Amendment rights to access literature and ideas. However, the plurality decision was also vulnerable to exploitation. Today, book banning is on the rise, as groups like Moms for Liberty use arguments of educational unsuitability to challenge books about race and sexuality for being divisive or sexually explicit and age inappropriate.
You wouldn't have the same books in a medical college that you would in a seminary, and just because a book is printed doesn't mean that it belongs in a children's library.
Some states have even passed legislation prohibiting certain content in books. In Iowa, for example, Senate File 496 bans from school libraries any material with descriptions or visual depiction of a sex act. And as a result, books like Forever by Judy Blume, The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky, The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, and many others have been pulled from library shelves.
People may not be ordering books or may not be adding books to their library collections that are really valuable books on really valuable topics.
I would love to be able to teach All Boys Aren't Blue or Gender Queer, but I'm never going to be able to teach them in Iowa as long as these laws still exist.
In middle school, those books of LGBTQ narratives were really important to me because they made me feel like I wasn't so alone.
But while the decision in Board of Education versus Pico didn't put an end to all school book bans, the case does remind us that the freedom to read is worth fighting for.
The long-term experience and goal is to show that we can win this struggle because we're going to have to fight it again and again and again.
Oftentimes, discussions of rights and responsibilities focus on adults, but conflicts between rights and responsibilities also impact young people. The little-known Supreme Court case, Island Trees versus Pico, is an example of how competing rights of parents and children and different responsibilities to educate and protect intersect to impact young people's lives. Even more importantly, the court case reminds young people of their responsibilities to use their voices to defend their rights.
When the Pico case happened, I was very encouraged by that because the Tinker ruling says not only that students should have a voice, but that they should be able to hear things that are controversial also.
I'm just one voice in 350 million people. But I think that when one individual stands up against tyranny or autocracy, stands up for the rights of others, a victory has already been won.
Now more than ever, the courage to stand up for these freedoms is vital. It might even be our responsibility to do so.
I want to be remembered as a patriot.